It's official. The Travis Green experiment has officially ended. He is heading back to Canada to pursue a new head coaching opportunity. But let's talk about a different candidate that I think a lot of people are excited for the Devils to potentially hire. And also, let's revisit Andrew Brunette and what he brought to the organization. Was he the reason why the Devils had a historic showing during the 2022-2023 season? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. In today's episode, we're going to talk about head coaches, specifically who's going to become the next head coach for the New Jersey Devils, because it was revealed this morning at the time of the recording that Travis Green is off to Ottawa to become the next head coach for the Senators. That's what we're going to talk about in the first segment, because I don't think I talked about Travis Green's brief tenure as the Devils' interim head coach. I'll share my overall thoughts on Travis and what I think the fit will be like for him in Ottawa. Then the second segment, we're going to talk about a specific candidate that has gotten the Devils discourse talking a lot on social media, which is the possibility of Craig Berube, former Stanley Cup champion, while coaching the St. Louis Blues back during the 2018-2019 season. Could he become the next head coach for the Devils? And then in segment 3, while we're on the subject of past, present, and possibly future head coaches for the Devils, let's revisit Andrew Brunette and his tenure as the assistant coach for the Devils, because he obviously became the head coach for the Nashville Predators. They made it to the playoffs. Unfortunately, they did get knocked out in the first round by Quinn Hughes and the Vancouver Canucks. However, he is still a finalist for the Jack Adams Award. And a lot of people are saying that Andrew Brunette was the main reason why the Devils had that historic season last year, and not really Lindy Ruff. And I want to debunk some of those discussions. But anyway, let's begin today's episode with Travis Green, because like I said, he is going to become the next head coach for the Ottawa Senators. And here's the thing. The Senators have underperformed the last few seasons. They obviously had a lot of expectations, especially with Brady Tkachuk. I remember a couple off seasons ago, they got Alex DeBrincat. People were excited for the Senators. They thought that they were going to become a playoff team, but the streak of them missing the playoffs continues to get larger and larger and larger, because I believe it's been, 7 years since the last time Ottawa has punched their ticket to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and now they're hoping that Travis Green can help move the needle just a little bit. And similar to the Devils, the Senators are a relatively young team in the NHL. Here are my overall thoughts on Travis Green. During his time as Devils interim head coach, he finished with a record of 8-12-1. The thing is like, Travis Green was just put into a very uncomfortable position because it was late in the season. The trade deadline was fast approaching. The Devils weren't projected to become buyers at the deadline. I think front office realized that they weren't going to come to an agreement with a contract extension for Tyler Toffoli. And if it's either the players or the coach, as we all know in sports, usually the head coach is the scapegoat when things are going wrong. And Tom Fitzgerald said in his press conference a few months ago that the Devils weren't winning and they just needed to change something up. Desperate times call for desperate measures. My expectations for Travis Green were anywhere from low to moderate, because Bill Spalding confirmed this on social media that he didn't anticipate the system to change all that much now that Lindy Ruff was gone. When people were saying that Lindy Ruff needs to go, Lindy Ruff needs to be fired, my thing was, regardless of whether it was justified or not, the Devils more likely were going to name Travis Green as the interim head coach. It wasn't going to be like an Edmonton Oilers situation where the Devils move on from their head coach and all of a sudden they light the NHL world on fire. They go on a lengthy multi-game winning streak. It just wasn't going to happen because the only thing that was consistent with this Devils team was their inconsistency. Seemed like a lot of people had lost faith in Lindy Ruff, and in comes Travis Green, who is notoriously known for telling it how it is. He obviously runs a very tight ship, and his training camps, they're no joke. I think I saw a few pictures make their way around social media that players have actually thrown up after competing in one of his training camps. And I remember Amanda Stein talked about how Travis Green was running the power play practice before the start of the season, which is he took no prisoners. It was fast. It was no BS type of style. And it was something that I was hoping that the Devils could utilize going forward. And when the team was fully healthy, they were one of the top power play teams in the entire league. And I think it shows the potential that Travis Green has. But overall, him being the next head coach for the Devils, I was okay with the Devils just moving on from him. In fact, I was fearful that Tom Fitzgerald would go the cheap route and just retain Travis Green and remove the interim tag off of his label. The thing is, like, I think Travis Green, like I said, he has potential to be a good coach, but I just don't think he's the correct fit for the Devils because when we look at his track history, he does have head coaching experience because, as we all know, prior to joining the Devils, he was with another Hughes brother, Quinn Hughes, up in Vancouver. But in the 5 or so years of him being the head coach for the Canucks, they had only made the playoffs once, and they lost in the second round to the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2020 NHL bubble. That my thing is, like, I think Travis Green will work with a rebuilding team like the Senators because they could try to build on one another. Travis Green could try to establish himself a little bit more. But when looking for the next head coach for the Devils, here's the criteria that I think that they need to look at. They need to see, like, can this coach succeed in the modern NHL? Because one of the complaints I did have for Lindy Ruff when he was first hired by the Devils, you could go back to my episode in 2020 if you really want to find the proof. He ran a style that just did not work in the modern NHL, which is why he saw more success in his earlier coaching tenure because, as we all know, the game is constantly changing. But I think Lindy Ruff did a decent job of developing the young players. The thing about the Devils is that they're not rebuilding, so I don't think getting a rookie head coach or getting a coach like Travis Green, someone who hasn't seen that much success as a head coach, would have been a good fit. I think what the Devils need to do is find someone who, A, like I just said, has recent success in the modern NHL, has championship pedigree. Obviously, that's hard to come by, but I think that's something you could definitely look at, and someone who has a decent amount of experience. I think that's the big thing because the Devils, they're not quite a contender, but they're not rebuilding either. They're just looking to take that next step in their overall development. And I think Lindy Ruff, and I'll play devil's advocate, I think he was a bit of a scapegoat, but like I said early on in the episode, if it's either the players or if it's either the coaches, unfortunately, the coach is going to have to go in that case because it's easier to make a coaching change than it is to completely gut your roster, and that's not what the Devils need for the time being. But where we're at now, the Devils have an opening for their head coaching position. Now it's a matter of time. Who's going to be the next head coach for the Devils organization? Could it be Mike Sullivan? I think Mike Sullivan fits the criteria because he's won 2 Stanley Cups within the past decade with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has experience coaching a superstar player like Sidney Crosby, and he does have some success because he's been doing this for a good while, and the Penguins are starting to go on the decline a little bit, but I don't think that's on him. Clearly, the Penguins, they're not as young as they used to be, and I think that kind of plays a factor in their overall development and execution. Sidney Crosby's still really good, but they didn't fix their issues last offseason. But nonetheless, I don't think Mike Sullivan will become the Devils' next head coach. Some things are going to have to happen in order for that to coming to fruition, but there is a coach available that I think also meets that criteria, and his name is Craig Berube, former Stanley Cup champion with the St. Louis Blues. We're going to talk about that momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that huge win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Elliot Friedman was recently on Sportsnet, and he talked about the possibility of Berube being interested with the Devils, but there's also another team that could enter the mix. Check it out.
I believe that New Jersey has real interest in Berube, and if Toronto wants him, they better get moving. I agree. I do believe.
What about that New Jersey job? You think like a Jay Woodcroft might be an option there? Or?
I've heard they've spoken to a ton of people. Yeah. I just think, and I've been saying this for a couple days, and eventually I'm going to be right about this. If you want Craig Berube, you better make the call.
Yeah,
because he's going to have multiple people. Put it this way, I got to think he would be very intrigued by the Devils, because I think a lot of people think the Devils are on the cusp of something big. But, you know, someone said to me today, do you think that Toronto is really a good job? I said, absolutely I do, because the rewards are
I know.
enormous.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
Okay, I'll circle back to what Friedman said in regards to possibly taking a head coaching position with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which, by the way, I feel for the Leafs fans right now, because even though they made it out of the first round for the first time since 2004 last season, they've fallen back into that gimmick, which is they have high expectations going into the playoffs, but they always fall short. And they almost overcame a 3-1 deficit to the Boston Bruins. The Maple Leafs took the lead in the third period, but then not too long afterwards, the Bruins tied it up, goes into OT, and obviously it ends in a heartbreaker. But going back to the Devils and their snafu for the time being, I think Berube fits the criteria that I am looking for in a head coach, because when assessing a head coach, it's a little different compared to a player. Because for players, you can look at stats, you can look at how they previously fit in with prior line mates or things like that. You can look at team success. There's a lot of data and analytics to basically get a better assessment as to what a player brings to a roster and how that could shapeshift the organization. But for a head coach, it's a little bit different, because no team is the same, in my opinion. Every team has their different star players, their different utilization, and the Devils are in a unique situation, which is they're not rebuilding, but they're still a piece or two away from being legitimate title contenders, in my opinion. And for Berube, the track history speaks for itself. From 2013 to 2015, he was a head coach for the Philadelphia Flyers. But how did he make a name for himself? It was when he became the interim head coach for the St. Louis Blues during 2018, because what happened? Mike Yeo, he was fired at the start of the 2018-2019 season. The Blues got off to a slow start. They had a record of 7-9-3, and they began the 2019 calendar year with a record of 15-18-4. And what also happened at around that time, Jordan Binnington joined the team. And he was a rookie goalie, and we know what he did during the course of the playoffs, and I think that speaks volume as to what the coaching staff was able to do with them. But I think any Blues fan will tell you it was going to take a miracle for the Blues to turn around their season, because I don't think anyone anticipated for the Blues to win the Stanley Cup that season. I sure as hell didn't, but they went on an 11-game winning streak, and it took them until late March. but they punched their ticket into the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they finished third in the Central. And we know what happened. They meet the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Bruins, they have past Stanley Cup pedigree. And for the Blues, they came away with the upset victory. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to Craig Berube and what he was able to do. So once again, he has championship pedigree. You could check that off the list. He's been in the league for a good while. Check that off the list. He's a former player, which I think also speaks volume. And during his time with the Blues, they have made the playoffs more times than not. Now, the Blues were still a playoff team after their Stanley Cup victory, but they didn't really make a deep playoff run afterwards because they lost in the first round to the Canucks during the 2020 bubble playoffs. 2021, they lost in the first round to the Colorado Avalanche. 2022, they lost to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Avalanche in the second round. 2023, they missed the playoffs. They finished third last in the Central. They finished above the Coyotes and also the Blackhawks. And then 2024, Berube was fired. But I still think he can be a legitimate coach for the Devils. And I think he is what they need because he was able to help turn around a hopeless team. It seemed like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to relate that to another coach that made his way to the Prudential Center in recent years, and that is Andrew Brunette. One of the reasons why I was big on the Devils bringing along Andrew Brunette as a part of Lindy Ruff's staff is because Andrew Brunette was someone I saw who could possibly take the reins for the Devils in case Lindy Ruff crashed and burned. Andrew Brunette was a finalist for the Jack Adams Trophy a few years ago as well, because he took the reins of the Florida Panthers after Joel Quenneville had to step down due to the scandal that took place. We all know what transpired. The fact that Andrew Brunette was able to help lead the Panthers to the President's Trophy, despite everything that was happening around them, their head coach, what had transpired in Chicago years before, he took the reins and he still led them to a really good finish. And that's one of the reasons why I was big on Andrew Brunette. And then obviously he's in Nashville right now, and I think he's doing pretty well for himself. And I think the same could be said for Berube. I think Craig Berube will be a good fit for the Devils. He has past experience working with star players like Vladimir Tarasenko or Ryan O'Reilly. Remember, during that Stanley Cup run, Ryan O'Reilly also won the Selke Trophy, and who's also a player on the Devils that could be a front runner for the Selke Trophy in a year or so. That's Nico Hischier. I think Berube would know how to handle the star players, and I think he can also give somewhat of a boost to the goaltending. I know he's not the goaltending coach, but still, I think he can definitely have a say or two about just how to develop them, because Jordan Binnington joined the team around midseason, and we saw what he did during the playoffs. And I don't think anyone anticipated that from Binnington. So I think Berube would be a good fit for New Jersey. Now, going back to what Friedman said about the possible Toronto gig, well, first and foremost, I'm not anticipating a coaching swap in Toronto. That position would need to open first and foremost, but let's just say hypothetically it does. I can completely understand, because Toronto, it is the mecca for hockey. It is the big stage, but keep in mind, there's a lot of expectations for the Maple Leafs, and they always seem to fall short. And I think for the Devils, you could do nothing but exceed expectations, because this is a team that has only made the playoffs, a few times the last decade or so. And whereas for the Maple Leafs, they do make the playoffs, but they can never nudge themselves out of the first round. I think New Jersey, while it's not the mecca of hockey, while it's not as popular as Toronto, while it's not a Canadian-based team, while it's not an original six team, I still think New Jersey is a good gig to have, because Berube can only just exceed expectations in New Jersey. and I think the fans would welcome him with open arms. Whereas in Toronto, we all know how strict they take their hockey, and we know that the Leafs fans, they can be a little unforgiving, especially if they cannot make it out the first round. But that's just more of abstract thought on my end. All right. We're going to talk about Andrew Brunette and reassess what his tenure was with the Devils momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you about Monopoly Go. We got to pause right here because I want to talk to you about Monopoly Go. You can team up with friends for time tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers so you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new time events to help you win big, like massive multiplayers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on, everybody. All right, to close out this show, we're going to talk about Andrew Brunette because I've talked about him a couple times throughout the course of this episode. It seems like a lot of people miss Andrew Brunette and what he brought to the organization. I can't argue. Andrew Brunette definitely did bring a lot. But make no mistake, he was not the head coach. He was not the last line of defense. Lindy Ruff was the last line of defense, which is why he was a finalist for the Jack Adams Trophy. When I'm seeing things on social media about how people are saying like Andrew Brunette was the reason why the Devils had that historic season, it was actually his team, and that was a big loss for New Jersey, I won't deny that was a big loss for New Jersey. But I want people to realize that he was still just the assistant coach, and he's not the one making the final calls. Now, he is the right-wing man to Lindy Ruff in that sort of way, but I don't think he was the sole reason as to why the Devils had the season that they had last year, if we're being completely honest. And another thing that I want you to factor in is that the Devils aren't as bad as a team as you're making them out to be. They were just very, very unlucky when it came to the injury bug because they were a relatively healthy team last year. Unfortunately, this time around, the same example could not be said. My thing is, I'm glad that Andrew Brunette is thriving right now in Nashville. I know that they've been eliminated from the playoffs. I know he's a finalist for the Jack Adams Trophy once again for, the second time within the past few seasons. But Lindy Ruff was still the head coach for the Devils, and I know Andrew Brunette, he played somewhat of a role, but I don't think he was the main reason why the Devils had the season that they had. And I'm not trying to diminish Andrew Brunette or anything like that. He was still important, but I just think people blow it out of proportion just a little bit. Similar to what I said in segment one. I think people, when it comes to head coaches, they blow it out the water in more ways than one, because a head coaching change wasn't going to save the Devils. Like, it doesn't matter who you put behind the bench because it was mid-season. The team was once again battling the injury bug, and they were very inconsistent, and they could never establish chemistry. I don't care who you put behind the bench. Unfortunately, the Devils just didn't have the same success that they had this year, and now they have the offseason to try to fix some of those flaws in their execution. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think about Travis Green joining the Senators? And what do you think about Berube potentially becoming the next head coach for the Devils? And what are your thoughts on Brunette and what he did for the Devils and what he's currently doing with the Predators? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Leave a comment down below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for his episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.